Hello, everyone, and welcome to this PractiTest series webinar. My name is Joel, and I'm a PractiTest Chief Solution Architect, and I want to welcome you today to our webinar. Today's session is actually one that I have been looking forward to going over for some time now, mostly because this is a question that as I work with a lot of practice customers, it usually comes up when people start saying, hey, you know what, you've been doing testing for a long time, and we would really like to know how is it that you prepare when you're going to start your testing projects, and what tips or tricks could you actually show us whenever we start our own testing project. And so I have been telling them informally about my checklist, and many people say, hey, why don't you make a webinar about it? And I think it's about time we do it. So more than happy, after talking with my team about it, and some warnings that I'm going to be giving in a couple of minutes. But I'm happy today to share with you my webinar. And so the name of today's webinar is Testing Project Preparation Checklist, or how to make sure that you are ready to start testing, okay? And again, it's something very personal, but I'm happy to share it with how many people are here. So first of all, let me see that it works. Oh, come on, wait. Oh, there it is. So first of all, a little bit about me. So as you see, my name is Joel, and I have been doing testing a little bit over 20 years now. And I've done a number of different roles. So obviously I started as a tester, and it's a chat for another time, an accidental tester at that, and stayed in the profession for a while. And I've been a tester, QA manager, and lead, obviously. I've worked in a large range of organizations, from very small ones to very, very large ones, actually. And I've been a blogger, speaker, consultant, more or less anything that you might think about on the industry. And today I work for a very cool company called PractiTest. Hopefully we have a number of customers here from our solution. But I'm the Practice Chief Solution Architect, and I'm also in charge of the QA. Oh, by the way, I see some people are saying hi. So hi, guys. By the way, you have a Q&A chat open. So go ahead and use it as much as you can, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Now, just a little bit about PractiTest, because after all, again, it's a great company, and they're also sponsoring us today. So PractiTest, as I mentioned, it's a pretty cool QA management solution. It's a SaaS-based, a hosted-based QA management solution, which means that you don't need to install anything. We basically run everything for you. The more incredible thing about PractiTest is that on the one hand, it's very, very simple and intuitive. But on the other hand, it's absolutely professional and flexible. So if you want to work with a simple system, you can do it. But if you need more professional and flexible support, that you also have it in the system. It integrates with many, many tools, from bug tracking systems like Jira and Pivotal Tracker, and even stuff like Bugzilla, and again, all sorts of things like that. And also with all of your automation frameworks. And one of the things that I'm most proudest of is our support. We have what I can assure you is the best support in the business, okay? Because all the team actually works on that, and we're always eager to work with our customers. And you don't need to take our word for it. There are some pretty amazing companies already working with us. Again, you can take a look into that, and obviously that's only some of the cool names that we have in there. Now, but enough about practice, let's actually talk about testing. And one of the things that I'm very proud of, it's, again, we'll get to the checklist in a second, but there are a number of activities that I'm really, really proud of. And one of them that is actually coming up, it's called the Online Test Conf. And hopefully many of you have heard of it and maybe even participated. But the whole idea of the Online Test Conf, I think we're going to be running our fourth one this time around, is to bring online tests, or to bring testing conference to people who cannot attend them physically. So we're doing a solely hosted testing conference. 2 days of conferences. We have, I think it's going to be around 12 or 14 different people speaking at the conferences. And they're full-blown conferences, just like you would do it when you go to a conference physically, but we do it virtually. And even though many of our physical conferences, like the STAR conferences, try to transfer, even broadcast their sessions live, it's not the same thing because, again, you have most of the people, most of the interactions happen when you're there. And what's singular about the online test conf is that the whole interaction is online. So everyone gets to talk with everyone else. You get to mingle with the presenters. You get to comment, ask questions, and do everything you would do in your live conference, but you do it virtually here. And unfortunately, the call for papers is closed. We're actually going to tell or communicate the actual speakers very, very soon. We're closing that up. And the conference itself is going to be on June 12th and 13th. You can go to www.onlinetestconf.com and sign up now. Absolutely and positively free of charge. And even if you cannot attend all the sessions, all of them will be recorded and shared. Okay, and this is one of the projects that I'm really, really excited and to be part of and to be working on. But enough about this, and I think that we need to actually start talking about the topic that we came here. And by the way, guys, just a couple of points here. We have the, I think it's a chat window here. It's there for questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them throughout the session. I will try to answer them live, but at maximum, we'll have a Q&A part at the end of the session, okay? So always happy to answer them. Obviously, I'm here live. So we're talking here about testing project preparation, okay? Sounds easy, right? We've done it. We do it all the time. And meaning, what's hard about testing? You basically get the product tested and report it. And if we want to explain what should happen on a testing project, in theory, all of us will receive a product. We will, one way or another, learn about our product or learn the product. We will test the product, obviously, because that's what we're here to do. This might be our main task. As we find our bugs, we will report them on the product. And once the bugs have been completely fixed, then we might run a sanity on the product. And once we're done, then we're done, and everyone is happy. No sweat, very simple, very straightforward. We've done it a million times. What could possibly go wrong, right? So when reality starts hitting us in the face, not to say anything that's going to hit the fan, we start seeing things that don't really work out. Like, for example, well, yeah, you might not have very clear definitions of the stuff that you're going to be testing. So your features, no one really defined them up front. You might start having what some people like to call, quote unquote, fluid delivery schedule. Oh, yeah, you're going to be getting some features here, some features then. You'll get them the moment that they're actually ready. That becomes a very nice way of putting it. Times where you do get documentation, many times it's conflicting. So, oh, wait a second, yeah, you should have a button to save, or wait a second, maybe it should auto-save, and who has the last truth about it? Who's here to make those calls? One of the things that tends to happen is that because, and one of the things that is happening quite a lot, and I see it all the time, people are switching to quote unquote agile, but they're not really doing anything remotely like agile. They're just gonna work on shorter timelines and on a very chaotic way. And it brings our testing to be pretty chaotic. And when something goes into chaos, it's not very nice, and we start losing control of what we're doing. There are maybe not clear objectives about what we're doing, and they say, well, it's an agile process, so the user stories and the objectives can change a little bit. Yes and no, this is not what we meant by agile when we started working that way. And because of all this chaos and because of all these changes, then there's all of a sudden a sense of urgency. Hey guys, we're late. We need to release it. The customer is actually breathing down our necks. And we need to go ahead and release something right now. And why are you stopping us? Please go ahead and test faster, or you shouldn't test everything there. And even at the end, once you're able to complete whatever you're doing, half the development team is already on another project. The other people don't really care about what you're doing. Maybe some of your customers are already working with. And there's a complete lack of clear completion of what we're doing. So the whole process that should be very, very straightforward actually becomes quite messy and not what we intended in the beginning. Okay, I'm guessing that some of you might have seen these in your lives. I know that I have seen this multiple times personally and on customers that I have been working with. And it might be very, very hard and challenging for us. So what do we do? Meaning, okay, so this is the truth, and this is the way that our lives actually work. So do you want to go out of testing? Are you going to start teaching developers how to work? What can you do about it? How can you actually work in an organized way when everything around you is complete chaos? Well, that's a good question. And for me, the answer about it is that we don't really have a choice, okay? It's not whether we can work in an organized fashion. It's that we need to have some sort of organization. So what do? Meaning we don't have a choice. We need to organize ourselves. We need to work on a way that it's not the chaos that our peers might be working with. We cannot afford to do it if we want to work professionally. So what do? It's a very good question. And I need to say that, as I said, I think it was on a conference about 2 months ago. I was in the UK. And someone asked, hey, what do you do when you're a junior tester and you start working on projects that becomes very, very chaotic? And my answer to it was that for my first 2 years as a test manager, I actually developed 2 bleeding ulcers. Okay, and I'm not kidding here. It means that I had medical conditions because the amount of stress that I was working with. First of all, I was smoking like a chimney, and I was smoking like 2 packs a day, and it was completely stressful. And I felt that all the weight was in my shoulders, and it was because I said, "Hey, everyone here is basically doing whatever they want, and they expect me to perform the test cases and to be their safety net." And well, it was hard, and I think that now, on hindsight, after 20 years of seeing that, I realized that I made a number of mistakes, and it really boils down to preparation, and it really boils down to understanding what is your role and how can you actually work on it. And for me, preparation is one of the keys, and this is what I want to share with you guys. So what do you do when you really don't have a choice? First of all, don't panic, okay? Don't go to the ulcer sites. Don't take it to heart. Remember, guys, you're here to do your job, and you're not here to be a nanny or a babysitter or the teacher of the development team. If they want to wreak chaos and do whatever they want, that's your job. You have your job and your responsibility. And the maximum that you can do is just to show them what they're doing, okay? On the other hand, you don't want to go overboard with formality and red tape. As I said, you need to work in an organized fashion. But you cannot become the bureaucrat that everyone's going to hate. And they're going to say, hey, whenever I go to Joel in order to try to get his help, he goes like, no, process, process, process. Because the world doesn't work that way. We need to cooperate, and we need to try to understand what is that balance between professionalism and flexibility. Flexibility in order to allow our teams to continue working agile, to continue making changes, to continue not being perfect, because no one is. But on the other hand, us as testers, as quality professionals, QA professionals, tester professionals, whatever you want to call them, we need sometimes to hold our grounds and to say, hey, this is the way that we're working. I need this and this data, and I need this and this time in order to perform this and that operations. Okay? And as I said before, for me, if you start correctly, then the chances of finishing correctly are way better. So how do you achieve that? How do you achieve a balance between professionalism and flexibility? I want to take here a tangent, okay? Now, raise of hands. I hope that you can actually do it. How many of you have been to New York City at least once? Okay, raise of hands. Wait, I'm seeing here. I need to put my glasses on. Okay, so very, very quickly, New York City, we have about 25% of attendees have been to New York City at least once. So I'm going to come clear with you guys. I live in Israel. I'm a Costa Rican guy, but New York City might be the city that I like the most in the world. Okay? Oh, sorry. Oh, wrong slides. I think I changed that in the sense, but you know what? Let's do it like this. I'll get to New York City in a second, but the first steps you need to do, sorry for that, in order to achieve that sense is, first of all, you need to take 5 minutes for yourself, okay? And we'll get to New York City in a second, but you need to take 5 minutes for yourself. And I think that before you are going to start any testing task and any testing project, you need to ask yourself a bunch of questions, Okay, the questions that you should be asking yourself are, first of all, why are you testing whatever you're going to start testing? And again, I want to explain this. What I'm saying right now applies both to a large project that we're going to be running multiple sprints and we have multiple teams working on that. But it also applies to a feature that someone gave you half a day in order to test. Why are we testing this half feature, or why are we testing this product that is being released? When are we testing this? Okay, usually there are constraints. We work as service providers. So we are providing a service to our development team and to our product owners. When do they need this service? Is it something they need right now? Do they need to release it tonight? Or is it something that's going to start in about a month from now and will run for about 6 months? How are we going to test this? Okay, and how it's a very large question. Is it an internal team? Is it an internal team that will have automation and manual testing? Can we crowdsource? All of that you need to ask yourselves. What are we using to test it? Many times, again, going back to automation, tools, scripting, anything that you might be working with that you might be forced to work with. And maybe the most important question is very related to why are we testing this, is who cares about our findings and what do they care for, okay? And these 5 questions that I religiously ask myself, and whenever I'm working with a team, I make sure that everyone on the team is aligned on these questions, are here in order to give you a frame of reference, okay? Are here in order to give you perspective, and are here because they're gonna season, as in season in your plate, they're gonna season all of the decisions and maybe dictate all of the decisions that we're gonna take whenever we're planning our testing processes, but maybe more importantly, running and modifying our testing processes as we go along. Why are we testing? When do we need to test it? How are we going to test it? What are we going to use it? And who cares about our testing are very important. So let's go back to New York City. And the reason that I take this 5 minutes for it is because, as I've learned, perspective is maybe the most important thing that you need to have whenever you're planning and running a testing project. And why is that? Even if I love New York City, I remember the first time that I was there. I think it was when I was about 15 years old. This is the Times Square area in New York City. I took this from the internet, so sorry if I stole this from someone. But New York City, everyone who gets to New York the first time when they're already mature, it's 100% overwhelming. Buildings are huge. Amount of people, it's incredible. The crowds can drive you nuts. If you're in the summer, it's going to be incredibly hot. If you're in the winter, it's going to be incredibly cold. And so at first sight, when you get to New York City at the beginning and you don't really know where you are, it's overwhelming. It's a little bit frightening. And I remember as a kid actually being afraid of New York. But what actually made the perspective was that the first night that I was in New York, I remember my dad, I think it was, he actually took a map and he said, hey, you know what? This is the map of New York City. And we're going to start understanding which places we're going to be going within New York City. And we'll understand these are the areas and these are the buildings. And by the way, we took the map the day afterwards and we were seeing, back then it was the Empire State Building. You see this building, here's the Empire State Building, or in that time it was the Twin Towers. So we're seeing everything. And once you actually got perspective, you were able, first of all, to understand where you were, to make decisions, and to call the shots. And the city that, when you're walking around it, looks very, very frightening, and you don't know whether you need to turn left or right, starts having the beauty of it and the enchantment of it, because you're able to understand where you are and where do you need to get from. So the first 5 questions that I always religiously ask are going to be there because we need to know, we need to see that map. We need to have the high-level view. We need to understand what's important for whom, why are we doing it, and what are the borders, the margins of the project that we're working. Now, once we have those borders and those margins, we need to start going deeper into the process. And so the second step, whenever I start a testing project, and again, remember, if it's going to be a 3-4 hour project, then this whole process will take 5 minutes. If it's going to be a project that's going to take 6 months, then it might be half a day to a day of doing this review. But I do have a checklist of points that I make sure to review every time before I jump headfirst into my testing project. And I really suggest you do the same. Basically, it's to make sure that you understand what you're doing, first of all. You get the broad strokes. You understand the high-level perspective of your project is going to be your 5 questions. And then a checklist of points to review, obviously a larger checklist, will help you to make sure that you're covering all your bases and you're doing a good enough job. So what I want to do for the continuation of the session right now, it's going to be I want to share with you my checklist. And as I mentioned when I was opening the session, this is not the first time that I share my checklist, but I usually share it on a more intimate situation when I get to explain more and pass along more. And obviously people who have worked with me have seen this checklist, but this is the first time that I'm broadcasting it. And it's a little bit scary because all of a sudden I need to stand behind my checklist. And I want to make sure that people understand a couple of things. First of all, remember, guys, this is my personal checklist. I cannot say that it's a complete list. I cannot say that it's a correct list. I cannot say that it is the list that will work for everyone on every situation. It's the list that I work with right now. It works for me based on my perspective and my knowledge. Another thing to understand is that, as you will see, my list is actually pretty large. And so I seldom get to cover all the points. Obviously, if I'm going to be testing for 2 hours, if I get to cover 20% of the points, it might be a lot. But it's important to know what you're going to be doing and what you're going to be choosing not to do. Another thing to take into account is that this list has been evolving for a long, long time, and I intend to continue evolving it and improving it for a long, long time. So if you see something there that you don't agree, it might be that it doesn't apply to you, or it might be that it's not correct and I need to modify it. And so again, remember, if you take this list to be your list from now on, great, but make sure to continue modifying it, okay? And do it. And the way that you actually get to modify and improve your list is actually by learning and from getting suggestions. So what I'm going to ask from each one of you who is currently attending this webinar is to provide me your suggestions as you're actually seeing my list. And the way that I want us to do this is using the chat that you have here. I want you to suggest, if you have a question, go ahead and ask it, and I will try to answer them towards the end. But if you have a suggestion, if you see part of the stuff that it's in there, go ahead and suggest it. We will go over, after we're done reviewing my list, we will go over those suggestions that you guys are actually bringing forward. If they're already covered, then we will skip them, but maybe we'll get some additional stuff that I will then go and incorporate into my list. And this will be your quote-unquote payment to me for sharing you my list in order to do it. Okay, so I want this session to be as interactive as we can, even though it is a webinar and most of you are connected remotely. Okay, so without further ado, let's actually start reviewing the list. Now, the list is a set of questions mostly, or points to cover, and I try to group them in sections, in themes, if you want. I also try to do it chronologically for you guys here, even though my list is a little bit more chaotic than that. But let's start, okay? And one of the first things that I always like to do is to understand my project, okay? And when I mean project, I mean the envelope, okay? The people who we're going to be working with, okay? And these are the questions that I like to ask in my checklist whenever we're doing this. First of all, how much time do we have to test? Are we going to be testing, as I mentioned, for 3 hours, or are we going to be testing for 6 months? Do we know who will be running the test cases? And this might seem like a trivial question. Oh, well, testers are going to be running. Well, not always. You know, I've been in a couple of projects where you had multiple players running tests. So we had a first phase where the people running the test cases were people in-house, obviously testers, but then we had a user acceptance test that ran throughout the whole world. And we had to make sure that people from all over the world were running test cases in their people who are not testers, maybe business owners, were actually running those test cases. And so we had to prepare for that. A very important question is when and where do we start the testing? Where it's a trickier question, but one is a very simple one. Hey, is it something we need to start testing now? Or do I have some time to prepare? Okay, how much time do I have to prepare? Another very important question is if this is a one-time project, okay, or some people call it a one-off project, meaning, okay, every effort that I do now, every preparation that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be throwing it away. Or is it part of maybe an ongoing effort? We're working on a product and we're going to be releasing multiple versions. It might be the first one, but again, it's something that will have some continuity in the future. And the last question that I like to ask on this section of project preparation is if I have a special budget. And it might sound weird. I mean, what do you mean by special budget? Well, especially if you're working in an organization, let's say that we're working here in a company that is developing a product, you might be doing that. But someone is going to give you right now a version that you need to release at this point. And you realize that, for example, let me give you an example from my life. We're working on a version of the product that needs to go and be delivered in another language. And we got a special budget for that specific language because the customer is actually willing to pay us more on that. So we were able to get all sorts of special things in order to make our testing easier because of that special budget. So whenever I'm thinking about project preparation, and remember, these are questions that sometimes you will be able to answer them very, very quickly. Sometimes you will need to go ahead and knock on doors and ask, like, hey, do I have a budget? It's something that you might not know unless you ask. Okay, so the whole idea is to make sure that you are able to ask these questions, especially if they're not trivial. Moving forwards to my next section, after we talk about the project, let's talk a little bit about the product. Okay. When I look at the product, do I have any documentation for my product or feature? Maybe there are user stories that I can work with. Maybe this is a legacy product that I actually even have help documentation, stuff like that. I haven't seen in a long, long time good requirement documents or good design documents. It might be a sign of the times, but we don't do that anymore. But check if you have documentation. If you have it, where is it? Whenever you start to work on a project, I tend to ask, hey, is this part of something that, I mean, have we fixed any bugs for that? We have a list of the bugs that have been fixed for this project. Not only to do bug verification, that's the trivial part, but maybe they already were verified. I use this as input data. Okay, and we'll talk about risk assessment a little bit later. But for me, understanding what the system should do, what bugs have been fixed as part of this project, helped me a lot in order to understand more or less what am I testing with regards to product. Okay. A question that is not trivial sometimes to ask is this a complete product or is it part of a solution? Meaning, okay, it might be trivial. You might be testing only a module within a complete system. But sometimes you're testing something that looks like a product, feels like a product, but then you realize that it's only one part of one big solution. And so you have a whole set of integration tests that maybe someone forgot to tell you that you need to run. Okay, so always try to ask, okay, the piece that I'm working with, the product, the whole world that I have in my hands, is it part of a bigger world? And if yes, what do I need to do about it? Moving forwards, given that not all developers are created equal and not all teams are created equal, then I always like to understand who is creating this product and where is this person located. Who is creating it? I usually try to understand, again, try to get references. So, oh, it's that team X is actually doing it. I will try to understand what's the record for team X. Okay, and that will give me, again, kind of an idea of how they need to prepare. Where I don't mean country. For me, where it's usually, is it someone sitting next to me or is it someone that I need to have another means of communication with them, teleport, obviously, conference or stuff like that. Okay, so for me, it's important. If it's someone that is sitting next to me, I may choose to move my team to sit with them. I believe that communication, it's key. And so if I can sit as close as I can to developers, that would be great. Sometimes developer will sit in another country, so that's not possible, but let's try to understand if that's the issue. And it's always important for me when I try to prepare my project to understand how am I going to be receiving this product. Okay, am I going to be getting installations? Am I going to be getting source code and I need to compile it? Am I going to be given only access to the system once a month or once a week, or can I actually ask for builds myself and build the product myself? All of that information will basically help me to know how do I need to prepare for everything that I'm doing right now. By the way, a question that we're usually asked is, are we going to be sharing the slides? The answer is yes, I'm recording this session and we're going to be sharing them. I think we're also going to be sharing the slides. And if I know my team, they may take even what we're doing right here and prepare a material that you will be able to download and work with. That may take a couple of weeks, but you can get in touch with us and we'll make sure to pass it along to you. And I want to remind you guys, obviously questions, but if you have your own ideas, go ahead and share them with us. We talked about the project, we talked about the product. Let's talk a little bit about our testing environment. Do I need a testing environment? What do I need to do about it? I usually ask myself, hey, can I start testing right now, or do I need to invest on that? Hardware, do we need any hardware? By the way, today, many people are using virtualization. That's also an idea, a cool way of working around this. But the question is, do you need it? Okay, are you going to be testing right now mobile devices and you need to have all sorts of mobile devices? By the way, a thing that I'm seeing more and more and more is that it's not only about the hardware, but you also need to have, again, physical access to the local providers. So are you going to be working with partners in remote locations in the world, and you need to organize for that? Do we need any specific environments? Do we need specific languages for testing? Remember, environments take time. Setting up languages takes time, even though, again, there's virtualization for everything and there's Dockers for everything we want today, but it still takes some time in order to do it. So that is something that you need to take into account. Do we need any spatial data? Again, sometimes you're going to be testing a product that requires terabytes of information. Okay, how are you going to generate it? How are you going to get it? Those are preparations you need to do. Do you need any specific software to test it? And I'm not talking about tools. That is the next question. But software, I mean, and I mentioned integrations. So maybe we're testing a system that runs on a specific platform. How do we get that? I don't want to test on the development environment. So if I need my own testing environment, how do I actually get it? Do we need any tools to test this? Okay, and it's not only about load and functional regression testing tools. You may need all sorts of different tools in order to do it, to do monitoring, to generate load, to go over all sorts of logs and stuff like that. All of that might be something that you will need. So all of those, and obviously there are additional questions you can ask yourselves regarding the testing environment, and you do want to understand if you have the correct environment, or if you need to build it and you need to get it. And remember, getting the correct testing environment, it's A, time-consuming, B, expensive. Okay, and if you have something that will require funds, you need to get them at the beginning of the project. You will not get them at the end of the project. There are a couple questions here. One of them is something that I will answer regarding Agile projects. I will answer it at the end. Another question for information, do we keep recordings of our webinars? The answer is yes. I think they're on YouTube, but check with us in a day or two when we send you the recording of this webinar. You will be able to see where they stored. Moving forwards with the presentation for a second. So let's talk a little bit about the product. Okay, so we talk about the project now and the product planning. Now let's talk about the information about the product. What do I have for my test cases? Where can I get information? Okay, for me, it's about specs if we have, user stories. I love build notifications. I learned so much from build notifications whenever I can actually see the files that were modified and the modifications done. Is there any additional technical information that I can get my hands on? Okay, and I was talking with a very good friend of mine, Rob Lambert, a couple days ago about technical testers. And guys, if you think that you're not a technical tester, and sorry for the tangent, you are a technical tester because testing is a technical profession. So stop kidding yourselves. And if you're afraid of digging into log files or working with technical stuff, kid yourselves no more and start doing it. Okay, so try to get as much information as you can, even from stuff that looks quote unquote Klingon-y developer. Okay, you will need to do it and maybe actually do it there. So with regards to product information, where do I get it? When I'm going to be testing a product, we usually fall into all sorts of issues and the very annoying answer, oh, this is a known issue. So don't care about it. Do we have a list? Do we manage a list of known issues? Hopefully someone does. If they don't, then you do need to do it and start managing that list of known issues. First of all, in order to make sure that you don't report them multiple times and everyone in the team will know them. Second of all, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that known issue is not something that is known to the developer, it's something that is known to the product team, and they're willing to go out with that. So try to have a list of known issues. What risks do we have here? I could talk for hours about risk management in the context of test management, and I think that I will do a couple more webinars in the coming months, but risks is the name of the game. Basically, what we're here to do is we're here to uncover issues that are the result of risks in the product. And many times those risks are something that people know about. So by risk, I mean, go to your developers, go to people who have access to information and say, hey guys, where should I be looking for issues here? Okay, and go ahead and ask. Okay, risks are something that should be documented, that is something that is usually known. And so you can go ahead and ask about those risks to your technical team. It's something as simple as say, hey, you know what? I'm starting to test this and this feature. What do you suggest that I actually start testing with? Okay, where are those risks that you think that I should actually work with? And you'll be amazed that many of the developers and technical staff are going to come forward and tell you all the stuff that you should be starting from, and those are your risks. Also, regarding known issues, are there assumptions or stuff not to test? Okay, so assumptions might be, well, we know that this system should be used only in English, so don't test it in Spanish. Okay, don't go ahead and start typing Chinese characters. Is there stuff not to test? Well, yeah, we know that all the API is not ready, so don't waste time testing on that. Okay, but that is information that usually people know it, but people might be very bad at communicating that. So go ahead and make sure, again, to ask that information. And something that I really, really like is going through historical issues and stuff that might be around the area. And historical issues for me, it's going over a bug database. If it's a continuous product, then to go over a bug database and try to understand, okay, what were the most critical bugs that we found in this area in previous releases? Maybe the complete bug or the same bug has already been fixed and it's not going to come back again, but it will give you ideas about stuff that you can check on. And a great source for historical issues, it's to go and talk to your support. Okay, and you can say, hey guys, you know what, we're testing a new version of this product. Do you remember which were the biggest issues found in the last 5 years on this product? Okay, I just want to make sure that they don't return. They'll be more than happy to share and complain all they can about the product so that you know how to test it better this time. Okay, and again, if you can, go ahead and talk to your support. I think I had a webinar a couple of months ago about communication. It's a very, very good way of when you start communicating with other teams in order to get information for yourself. Okay, I see all sorts of ideas. That's cool. We're going to get to them a little bit later on. And I remember, go ahead and share them. Now, Testware. And I like the name Testware. We have hardware, software, peopleware. We have Testware as well. And my question here would be, do we have existing test cases? Maybe we tested this product in the past. We have test cases. It doesn't mean that they're good test cases. It only means that we have test cases. If we have them, then we will need to go over them and understand if we can use them or not. Do we have any existing scripting or load testing? By scripting, I might mean automation scripts for that we can reuse. If yes, and they're running and you can work with them, then you would be a very big fool not to use them. How are we managing this testing project? Hopefully not with Excel, and if you need a good tool, then I can suggest PractiTest. Wink, wink. But it's important to manage your testing project. Okay, so look for a proper way to manage your testing project and to make sure that your test cases are organized, your runs are organized, your metrics are organized, and you can actually do a pretty good job about that. Excel is not a tool for testing, and Jira is not a tool for testing for those of you who are thinking about it. Jira is a very good ticketing system. Get a test management systems that integrate with Jira, and there are plenty of those. One of them is, obviously, PractiTest. How are we reporting bugs? And by how I mean, please don't tell me you're sending them by email. If you're working in a very agile environment where bugs are fixed on the spot, great. What with those that are not fixed on the spot? And I know that some people say that a bug should either be fixed on the spot or forgotten about it. I don't buy into that idea yet. I still think that bug reporting systems and bug databases are important. So how are you reporting and managing those bugs? And if you have a triage in place, and if you don't have a triage in place, you need to get one. That is how you're going to be deciding what to fix later, what not to fix, and who should start fixing that. So all of that I added to Testware, and obviously there's quite a lot more that you can add to that. Testing process, we're almost to the end of my list, and as you can see, it's a large one. So that is why I was saying that you don't always get to review everything on the list. But for me, the testing process, it's very important, and many times we take it for granted because we say, hey, we know how to test, and we know what we will be testing and how we're going to be managing our test cases, but sometimes it makes sense just to, again, take 5 minutes to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So who's going to be writing the new test cases? Who's going to be reviewing your test cases? Okay, by reviewing the test cases, I mean two things here. If you already had test cases written, someone needs to go over them and validate them. But no less important, maybe even more important than that, if someone is creating new test cases, I really, really believe in peer review of test cases. So who in your team is going to be reviewing those test cases? Now, for those of you who have the luck of working on a team where you're the sole tester in the team, you can get a developer to review your test cases or a product owner to review your test cases. Why do we like to review new test cases? Any guesses? Any guesses? If you're guessing, please say it out loud, even though no one's going to hear you. You review test cases because you're not perfect, okay? And when you review a test case, you're basically going to be finding flaws in that test case. Peer review is going to be great. You're going to be finding stuff that you missed. You're going to be finding stuff that you could test better. You're going to be finding stuff that maybe no one should test. Or if a developer is going to be reviewing your test cases, by that review of a developer, they will be finding bugs by themselves. And trust me, they're going to be doing that. Where are we running the testing process? Again, it might be a tool, it might be an environment. Just make sure that everyone understands that. If you have multiple environments, do you have an integration environment, a staging environment, a testing environment? We're going to be running that. And a cool question, especially on larger length projects, is if we can run other testing activities. What do I mean by other testing activities? I mean not directly scripted testing or exploratory testing sessions, but stuff like bug hunts and beta projects and customer advisory board meetings and customer trips and all sorts of activities that should help you to uncover other types of bugs that are no less important and sometimes even more important than that. Okay, so all of those are very critical questions that you may ask yourself or the team when you're planning your project. Now, a part that should not be forgotten, and sometimes people tend to do it, especially in projects that are very, very, very time constrained, is all our section about non-functional testing. Okay, and these are all the ELTs and loads. So basically, what about security? Do you know security testing? Do you need a security testing consultant? Load. Do you care about load testing, performance, volume testing? Compliancy, guys, sometimes it's technical compliancy, like if you're going to be doing certification of devices, sometimes it's compliancy with disabilities. All of that requires people to have specific knowledge. Additional stuff, and again, these are the things that I usually cover myself, like recovery testing and usability testing. These are the ones that I have in my list, but they're incredibly large and very low-level list of non-functional tests. And the longer your testing project, the deeper you will want to go into that. Okay? Now, almost towards the end, I think this is actually the last one, it's information and reporting. Do you know the question about if a tree falls on an empty forest, does it make a sound? Do you know the answer to that one? The answer to that one is that if a tree falls on an empty forest, no one cares if there's any sound. So is there anyone who cares about your testing? If the answer is no, stop your project, start doing something else. But if someone cares, then let's try to understand who does. Okay, so who will be receiving the information? What information do they require? And when you ask yourself who will be receiving and what information, you're basically trying to ask yourself, okay, so what information do these people need in order to make their decisions? So if we're talking about a sales team, the information that they need to get is if the product is going to be going out on time. If we're talking about a support team, the information they require is whether the issues that they promise their customers are going to be fixed. If you're talking about the product team, it's, okay, wait a second, do we need to compromise on features? And if it is, maybe the technical team and development team is, where do we have unforeseen issues that we need to start tackling them right now in order to meet our schedule? So each different stakeholder in the organization will need different information depending on the decisions they need to make. So who needs your information and what is the information they require? Okay, so these are, in my mind, the most underrated questions that most testers forget to ask themselves, because we are naive enough in order to think that we can create a dashboard that will be a one-size-fits-all for everyone, and if anyone has additional questions, they will come ahead and ask. No, they will not ask, and yes, they will just think that whatever you're doing doesn't have any value, and if they want to know something, they will come knocking on your door and asking for it, and that is bad. So try to understand, that is a completely different webinar, and I already did one, and I'll be happy to talk more about that later on. But that's very, very important. In addition to that, what reporting platform are you going to be using? Are you going to be using dashboards? Are you going to be using wiki pages? Are you going to be having weekly meetings? Are you going to take a megaphone and just scream your lungs out? How are you going to be reporting that? And one of the things that happen all the time, and that is that the project changes, stakeholder changes, and the needs for information also change. How are you going to be updated whenever those needs are changing? Okay, especially for those of us who work on Agile, the most important thing about Agile is the embracement of change. So part of that change is the information needs that are going to be constantly changing, and how can we make sure that we're adapting to that as well. Okay. Now, so this is my list, and as I mentioned before, if it looked too large and you were not able to capture everything, don't worry, you will get to it, and I promise that you'll have a chance to see the slides and maybe even get the list. But let's go over some of the points that people have been suggesting, and if you have additional points suggested, go ahead and place them on the chat. And there are also a couple of questions here, so I will try to go over them right now. So a nice question here is, how do we manage checklists in an Agile project where there's continuing change in the requirements? The idea of the checklist is to serve for you on the background, is something that you might want to go over once a week if you're working on a longer range project, maybe once a sprint, because these are questions that you need to ask yourself maybe every planning process for each one of your sprints in order to understand how do you prepare for that sprint. The checklist is not your testing steps checklist. That is something that will continue changing as your user stories and your Agile process changes. But what shouldn't change are the questions that you ask yourselves in order to know what you're going to be changing. Okay, so make sure to differentiate. I'm not giving you a checklist of what you need to go ahead and change tomorrow. Oh, login I need to change, to check, great. iOS support I need to change. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how do you know what to test. So that's going to be very, very important. I'm going over the question here. So another idea here is, when you're talking about testing environments, to ask what kind of roles are needed to start testing. I think that's a great idea, meaning when we talk about testing environments and testing in general, when we're talking about the application, if you're going to be having different roles within your application, be explicit to ask about it. I think that it's something that I might consider adding that, but yes, roles within especially complex systems, if it's not explicitly defined on the definition of your product, it's also something that you will want to make sure that you're actually covering. I see someone here who was actually answering the part about why do we need to review, because sometimes we're testing the wrong things. Absolutely, we need to make sure that we do not, that we review everything correctly. Okay, so I see that there were not too many suggestions here, but if you have additional suggestions to continue adding to my list, I'll be more than happy to get them. There are some additional questions, though, that are coming here. And one of them is, how do you organize your testing when there is no test cases based from version 1.0, and now we're moving to another version and we have no timeline? So the case is very simple. Let's say that you have a version outside already, and you're releasing a new version, and they tell you, okay, go ahead and test the new version outside. So basically what you have is a complete, it might be two cases. First of all, you might be adding small features to version 1, so it might be version 1.1 or 1.5. In that case, you need to make all sorts of assumptions and try to maybe create ad hoc sanity test cases, to test the regression on that, and more specific test cases to the new functionality. That might be a case of that. The other case is that you're creating a complete new product from scratch, and basically the first product will serve as what is called an oracle. And an oracle, it means that you cannot base any of the results on those cases, meaning you cannot say that it works, that if something worked in the previous version, it worked, but it basically will tell you what the behavior is for your new product, and you need to create complete new functionality tests for the whole system. Okay, but it's basically, you need to understand if you're going to be doing a progression testing or a complete new testing of the whole system that you have in there. Okay, and again, there are additional people answering here, so I will let you go over that as well. Question here about PractiTest. Can you import Excel into PractiTest? Yes, you can. I don't want to make this a PractiTest session. If you have questions about PractiTest, I'll be happy to take them over email later on. And if you want to try out PractiTest, go to www.practice.com, and you can sign up to a 2-week trial from the website. You don't even need me for that. Okay, guys, we have about 2 more minutes for questions if you have additional questions. In the meantime, and just to make sure, guys, some of the things that we started doing and I started doing lately, it's actually attending all sorts of countries, webinars, and places. So if you want to meet me, I'm going to be in Tokyo actually the first week of May. So if you are in Tokyo and you want to meet with us, send me an email. I'll be more than happy to meet with you. PractiTest users on the call, if you want to meet with us, then we're going to be having a customer tour for the first week of June. We're going to get in touch with most of you later, but if you are a practice customer and you want us to to visit you, then let us know. We're going to be there in June. Then if you're in New York City during the, as I mentioned, New York City, I love that city. Between June 4th and 6th, there is a cool conference called the Test Leadership Conference. I'm actually talking there. So if you want to meet me, that's another way to see. Obviously, the online testconf.com that I mentioned between June 12th and 13th. And for those of you, again, PractiTest users, we're starting to plan a July 2018 European customer tour. So go ahead and let us know. Cool, there's another question here. How important do you think it is to understand API testing as a manual tester? That's a great question, but I think that the question is, what is a manual tester? And I think that you shouldn't tag yourself manual versus automation tester for the person who asked this. You're a tester and you need to test the product. If your product has an API, that API needs to be tested. Now, you can test it using scripts, you can test it manually. API, there are plenty of tools that you can actually do it also manually. And you can just go ahead and do that. That is part of what I meant about being a technical tester. Start learning about APIs. They're really not scary. They're just as the system it is, but instead of buttons, you basically send scripts to it. Okay? So you don't, by the way, you don't need a developer background in order to do API testing. You will need a developer background in order to write an API, but to test an API, you only need to be a user. Now, question here, when can people email me? This is my email address, and I mean it, joel@practice.com. I try to read all the emails that I get. I'll try to answer most of them if I can. Most of the stuff that I blabber about on my webinars, you can also read about it on the blog. So the blog is qablog.practice.com. And guys, we're almost towards the end of our time. So I want to thank everyone for being in the call today, for being in the webinar today. I think it hasn't been announced yet, but we're going to be having a webinar in May with my very good friend Oren from testing.io about manual and automation testing together. So stay tuned, and I'll be very happy to talk to you on our next webinar. So for now, guys, this is Joel from PractiTest saying I hope that this was useful and fruitful, and we'll be contacting with you later on. Have a great day, have a great week, and do some very good testing. Talk to you later. Bye-bye, guys.